Nervous system regulation strategies for anxiety are everywhere. I'm sure you've seen millions of videos on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. Everybody's talking about them. But there is a huge mistake that most people are making with these strategies, and they don't even realize it. So in today's video, we're going to dive into nervous system regulation strategies, the ones that really work for anxiety, and how to avoid making the number one mistake that most people make. If you're new here, my name is Deanta. I'm a clinical psychologist, the author of The Gift of Anxiety, and the founder of the Unstuck Initiative, where I've helped hundreds of clients to heal their anxiety. And we do that by addressing 3 parts of anxiety. So before we dive into understanding exactly why nervous system regulation strategies are so important, but also how we have to use them in the right way, let's first understand where they fit into the picture of healing your anxiety. First, we have to understand that there are 3 parts to anxiety. The first is that anxiety is really just a signal. It's an alarm, it's a symptom, it is not the problem. Yet most people are addressing it as if it is, and they're completely forgetting that there is a root cause to that anxiety, a reason that it exists. And until you address that real underlying reason, the anxiety is just going to keep ringing the alarm bells. The second part of anxiety is that anxiety gets stuck on itself in what we call an anxiety loop. And I've made a video about that, which will teach you exactly how anxiety gets stuck in this anxiety loop, the anxiety about anxiety. Unless we change our response to anxiety, we're going to stay in that loop. The third part of anxiety is the physiological response. This is where the nervous system gets stuck in a pattern of sympathetic activation and it starts to feel a bit burnt out. It can often ping stress signals to the brain that make you think that you're anxious, even though you're mentally or emotionally not so. So those 3 parts are actually linked to our mental, emotional, and physical bodies, right? What we're thinking about anxiety is what's keeping us in that anxiety loop. That's the mental anxiety. All the underlying root causes, the stuff that was created by our nervous system patterning as we were growing up, that's all of our emotional anxiety. And the third piece, which is our nervous system, is our physical anxiety. Now, nervous system regulation strategies are super important, and they're 100% why we have to deal with all 3 parts. Because if you're only healing anxiety mentally and emotionally, and you've completely forgotten about the body, well, then we can't heal, right? Because it is very much a physiological experience. Most of you are going to agree that the anxiety that you feel is largely physical, right? It's the breathing difficulties or the chest pain, it's the heart palpitations, it's the foggy brain, and all of the crazy symptoms that we can experience when we're anxious. Most people go to a doctor talking about those physical symptoms. They're not explaining that they feel afraid. They're explaining what's happening physiologically when they're talking about their anxiety. So the body is a really important part of the whole picture, and 100% it is required that we heal that. So there are many nervous system regulation strategies out there. Why do they work? Because they're all targeting your vagus nerve. This is a beautiful nerve that runs from your brain all the way through your body, connecting with almost every single organ, right from your colon and all the way up, your ears, your eyes, everything. Now, the vagus nerve's main job is to keep your body in a state of balance. So it's picking up information from your body and it's sending that information to your brain so that your brain can tell the body what to do next via the vagus nerve. So, for example, if it's picked up that your sugar levels are a little out, then it might tell the brain that, and the brain might say, well, let's switch on some hunger cues. But, well, this is a very basic description of what actually happens, but the vagus nerve is communicating between the organs and the brain all of the time to keep you in balance. But the vagus nerve is also responsible for putting you into sympathetic activation. So when the brain has perceived that there is something threatening going on, you have to move into a fight, flight, or freeze state in order to keep you safe. And the vagus nerve is responsible for making that happen. So when you move into an adrenaline response, the fight, flight, or freeze state, your vagus nerve is switching up your heart rate so that you can get blood to your body. Your vagus nerve is switching up your heart rate and your breath rate. It's increasing the glucose in your body to give you energy, and it's switching off your digestive system. It is 100% now in sympathetic activation. Over time, that sympathetic activation stays, and the vagus nerve has somewhat lost sight of its main function, which was to keep everything in balance. This is why people start to struggle with things like irritable bowel syndrome, fibromyalgia, and sort of vague aches and pains and ailments that don't really have a physical cause when they go to the doctor. No one can identify why that's happening, and yet the experience is so real. This is because the body is not entirely in balance. Now, good news is that's not fatal, and nor is it forever, because once that vagus nerve is regulated and goes back to its ordinary job, everything will fall back into place again. But our job is to help that vagus nerve get out of sympathetic activation, especially if there is no real, valid threat for us to be in a fight, flight, or freeze response for. So how do we do that? That's where nervous system regulation strategies come in so handy. Now, you'll probably have come across many of those. There are stretches that you can do, there's breath work, there's humming, there's shaking, there's cold water submersion, and all of these strategies are really excellent. There's getting into nature, putting your feet on the ground, just drinking some water and getting some sunlight on your eyeballs, having some fresh air, having a hug that lasts more than 20 seconds. There are plenty ways in which we can regulate our nervous system, and those strategies are not hard. The problem is that most people are trying too many of them. So we're on TikTok and we've seen all these videos come through about the butterfly hug that we should try, or the latest shaking technique, or we can do these stretches where we roll our eyes from one side to the other. Disclaimer, they do work. The problem is if you're trying to regulate your nervous system by doing 20 strategies when you're already exhausted, what are you doing to your nervous system? You're exhausting it, right? And you're pushing it into sympathetic activation. So we want to be really careful about how we use those strategies. Try not to use 20 in a day when you're exhausted. The ideal is to pick 1 or 2 strategies that really work for you, that help you to feel calm when you use them, and to practice them every single day when it feels easy. So I teach my clients to habit stack. They need to find one strategy that works for them, and they need to stack it onto something that they do during the day ordinarily. So for example, if you really enjoy humming, which is really good for the nervous system, by the way, then maybe you can always sing a good song while you're in the shower. So you're showering anyway, and then you just latch on some nervous system regulation. Or perhaps every time that you go to the bathroom, you can practice a deep breath, a sympathetic sigh, for example, where you just breathe sharply in through your nose twice and then slowly exhale to release that. Do that twice every time you go to the bathroom. Super easy. The idea here is that you really want to make sure that when you are regulating your nervous system, it feels like a good, calming thing to do. You haven't put yourself into a stress response telling yourself, you have to do this right now. You must do more. These aren't working. Let's find more. Can you see how that response is actually a stress response? Now, if you're finding this useful, please be sure to hit subscribe, because I release videos like this every single week to help you to understand your anxiety and the steps required to heal it so you can feel yourself again. So that's the number one mistake that most people make, is they're grabbing all the strategies that they can find, they're stacking them on top of one another, and then they're creating pressure in their day to get them done, which is not helping. But there is another mistake that many people make, and they don't even realize that it's happening. And that is that if we are using all those strategies to regulate our body physically, which again, as I say, they do work, but you haven't addressed your fear of anxiety or the root cause, then those two parts of anxiety are going to keep creating anxiety and keep pushing your nervous system, freshly regulated, right, back into sympathetic activation. We cannot regulate a nervous system if we're going to stay in a state of fear. And if you are afraid of feeling anxious because you're worried about what the symptoms are doing to you, or you're worried about what anxiety is going to do to you tomorrow or later, or you're worried that you're going to be stuck like this forever, or that you're going crazy, well, then you are pushing yourself into sympathetic activation every single time you see anxiety. All that nervous system regulation cannot work. It cannot be effective. And that's maybe why you've tried some of those nervous system regulation strategies and they haven't been all that effective because you did help yourself feel calm, then we pushed ourselves back into emotional or mental anxiety. And that is why it is so important to be healing all three parts of anxiety at the same time. Because when you're really addressing the underlying root cause, anxiety can stop ringing the alarm. And when you have addressed your fear of anxiety and you've learned how to empoweredly accept it, then it will no longer generate anxiety about anxiety. And when you have calmed the body and the nervous system, you now allow yourself to feel safer in your body. So those are the three parts. So you've watched this video all the way to the end. Thank you for staying with me. Your next step is to go and pick one nervous system regulation strategy that works really well for you. And maybe that requires a little bit of exploration to try on a few and see how they work. My personal favorite is the sympathetic sigh. What happens here is that we're actually doing to the nervous system what it naturally does when we're really distressed. When you think about a child who's really upset and crying, they often do that kind of double sniff and then an exhale. Now you can actually force your body to do that and it will help your nervous system to regulate. It's just simply sharp inhales through your nose and then a slow exhale through your mouth. So 2 in your nose and 1 out your mouth. And the longer you can make your exhale last, the better it is, because that's when your heart rate is going to slow down. And you can do that twice in a row and just feel how much calmer you feel. Other people really enjoy cold water submersion, just turning your shower onto a cold just after you've had your hot shower. Try and stay there for 15 to 30 seconds, see how you go. Cold water on your face is also really, really helpful. A lot of people enjoy shaking, so you can just try and have a great dance party. Another one that's a firm favorite with my clients is singing in the shower. Just belting out your favorite Disney tune at the top of your lungs is really going to help regulate that vagus nerve because it's running down just past your larynx, and those vibrations really help. Find one thing that you do every day naturally without thinking about it, and now latch on your nervous system regulation tool to that and see how you go. Now, the really important thing you have to remember is that when you do nervous system regulation strategies to help you feel better, and you don't continue doing them when you do feel better, it's likely that your nervous system can go back to sympathetic activation. So just like when we take on healthy eating and exercise, if we don't continue with those practices, we're going to notice it on our body. Same thing with nervous system regulation. We want to be practicing this on a daily basis. So the easier you can make it for yourself, the better it is for you long term. Don't forget to hit subscribe so that you can keep up with every video that I share once a week, changing your perspective on anxiety and sharing real valid strategies that can help you heal and feel yourself again.